Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Ozcast.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We've got a lot to cover today. From March 7, 2025, tariffs, sanctions, government shakeups, even some World Cup stuff.
Wow.
It's mostly from CNN Politics, and honestly, it's a lot to unpack.
It is.
But that's what we do here, right? Find those little nuggets of insight hiding in plain sight.
Absolutely. And what I find fascinating is how everything seems connected: international relations, domestic policy, even sports.
Yeah.
It really highlights how one decision can just ripple out in ways you might not expect.
Right. Like we're seeing that with Trump's latest move threatening these new tariffs on Canadian lumber and dairy.
Oh, yeah.
This comes right after delaying tariffs on other goods under the USMCA agreement.
Right.
So is this a negotiating tactic or is this a genuine trade war? I mean, help me out here.
Well, it definitely leans into his America First policy using tariffs as leverage.
Okay.
He's specifically calling out Canada's 250% tariff on U.S. dairy products,
Wow.
saying it's unfair to American farmers. But, while Trump frames this as a fight for fairness, some economists see it as a risky gamble.
Risky how? What's the downside?
If this escalates, it could hurt American businesses that rely on Canadian imports, and consumers could end up paying more for everything from construction materials to cheese.
Oh.
It throws the whole USMCA deal into question, too.
Yeah.
The deal was supposed to, make trade smoother, not more volatile.
So it's not just about dairy farmers then?
No.
It's this whole web of interconnected industries and agreement.
Exactly. And this isn't isolated.
Oh, no.
Trump is also taking aim at India and China for what he calls unfair trade practices.
Right.
It's a very confrontational approach.
Okay, so that's one layer of international tension.
Yeah.
Then there's Russia. Potential new sanctions are on the table, specifically targeting their banking sector in response to the ongoing attacks in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, Trump is saying Russia holds all the cards in this war.
Right.
What are we to make of these conflicting signals?
It's strategic for sure. Sanctions are a way to exert pressure, but historically their effectiveness has been mixed.
Yeah.
We've got to remember there are different types of sanctions.
Right.
From targeting individuals to, entire sectors of the economy.
Right.
Some experts argue that broad sanctions can actually backfire, hurting ordinary citizens more than the intended targets.
So it's like a scalpel versus a sledgehammer. You want to be precise with your pressure.
Precisely.
But it gets even more complicated with peace talks coming up in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And guess who's not invited?
I'm going to guess Russia.
Russia. And that speaks volumes.
Absolutely.
Their absence suggests they're not serious about negotiating right now.
Right.
So we're left with this uneasy standoff, sanctions as a potential lever, but no real dialogue happening.
That's where we are.
So much for diplomacy, huh? It feels like those same power dynamics are playing out here in the U.S., too.
Enough so.
Case in point, Elizabeth Oyer, head of the Justice Department's pardon office, just got fired.
Oh, wow.
This isn't just any personnel change. This is happening right in the middle of the controversy over Trump's use of pardons, especially for people connected to the January 6th Capitol riot. Yeah, and to make matters even more suspicious, 2 New York prosecutors were put on leave after they objected to the DOJ dropping the corruption case against NYC Mayor Eric Adams.
Really?
It's hard not to see a pattern here.
It does raise concerns about whether decisions are being made based on the law or on political maneuvering.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about quid pro quo, and it all feeds into this bigger worry about Trump's influence over government agencies.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room.
Oh, boy.
Elon Musk, that report about his role in the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, is raising eyebrows.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's involved in court cases, even influencing decisions at places like the Treasury Department.
The SHE itself is already controversial.
Yeah.
It was created under the guise of streamlining government,
Right.
cutting costs, making things more efficient. But critics argue it's shrouded in secrecy, giving Musk undue influence over important decisions. And a judge even questioned who's really in charge at these agencies.
Yeah.
Is it elected officials or is it Elon Musk?
That's a pretty chilling thought. And it gets even more unsettling with this upcoming hearing about the Office of Personnel Management's ability to fire federal workers en masse.
Right.
If DOGE is behind that, we're talking about potentially dismantling entire departments.
And that raises so many questions. Is this efficiency? Or is it something more sinister? What happens to the crucial services these agencies provide?
Speaking of government agencies and services, there's this interesting story about the VA. They're actually allowing veterans crisis line responders to work remotely.
That's significant, especially considering the broader push from the Trump administration for federal employees to get back to the office.
Yeah, it's almost like they're making an exception here, recognizing the sensitive nature of the work these responders do. They're dealing with calls about trauma and mental health crises. Privacy is paramount.
And think about the context. The national call centers shut down during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So these responders have been working remotely out of necessity.
Right.
This decision acknowledges that sometimes a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. Employee well-being, especially in these crucial roles, has to be a priority.
It's a good reminder that policy decisions have ripple effects, unintended consequences. You think that same logic applies to the 2026 World Cup? The U.S. is co-hosting with Canada and Mexico, and Trump seems pretty hyped about it.
He even set up a whole task force to manage preparations.
Wow.
Both he and FIFA President Gianni Infantino are emphasizing the potential economic benefits. You're talking about 200,000 new jobs and a $40 billion boost.
Wow, sounds great on paper.
It does, right?
Sounds like a winning goal.
Yep.
But some travel industry folks are worried.
Yeah.
Is the U.S. even ready for that many visitors?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
The travel industry is still recovering from the pandemic. A sudden influx like that could overwhelm airports, hotels, transportation, you name it.
Yeah.
It's a logistical nightmare waiting to happen.
And to add fuel to the fire, there are rumors of a clash between Elon Musk and Secretary of State Marco Rubio during a cabinet meeting about World Cup prep.
Really?
Apparently, they disagree about DOG's involvement.
It seems like no matter what the topic is, DOGE and its influence are lurking in the background.
Yeah.
And this tension, this power struggle, is not just about who gets to call the shots, but also about the future direction of government itself.
Okay, so we've got international trade spats, power plays within the government, and a potential World Cup meltdown on the horizon. It's a lot to digest, and we're just getting started. Stay with us as we dive deeper into the news from March 7th, 2025.
And it's fascinating how these themes of power and control play out on the global stage, too.
Yeah.
Take, for example, the news about Ukraine losing access to commercial satellite imagery purchased by the U.S. government.
That sounds like a huge blow. This imagery from a company called Maxar has been vital for Ukraine in tracking Russian troop movements. What's behind this sudden cutoff?
It's directly tied to the Trump administration's decision to halt intelligence sharing with Ukraine that could be used offensively against Russia.
Right.
The stated goal is to avoid escalating the conflict.
Yeah.
But it leaves Ukraine in a vulnerable position.
So it's this delicate balancing act supporting Ukraine's defense without fueling the fire. But does withholding intelligence really achieve that? As some might argue, it emboldens Russia, seeing it as weakness.
That's the debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is this cautious diplomacy or a strategic misstep? It highlights the ripple effects of seemingly isolated decisions.
Right.
And those ripples are being felt here in the U.S. too, especially when it comes to the balance of power between government and its workers.
You're talking about the Department of Homeland Security's move to rescind the collective bargaining agreement for TSA officers, right?
Exactly.
And they've also stopped collecting union dues through payroll. That's a huge hit to the American Federation of Government Employees.
It's a bold move.
Yeah.
And DHS claims it's all about making airport security more flexible and responsive.
Okay.
But critics see it as a blatant attack on unions, an attempt to silence dissent and erode their power.
And the union isn't backing down. They're calling this retaliation for their legal challenges against the Trump administration's actions towards federal employees. It's a power struggle, plain and simple.
It fits into a pattern we've seen under this administration, a push to diminish the influence of unions, particularly federal ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it raises a crucial question. Who benefits from a weakened workforce, especially in sectors vital to national security and public safety?
It's not just the TSA feeling the squeeze. There are rumblings about potential staffing cuts at the Department of Veterans Affairs, too. An internal memo suggests they're aiming to revert to 2019 staffing levels.
That could mean over 70,000 employees losing their jobs.
Wow.
And while the administration cites efficiency and cost-cutting as the reasons,
Right.
it's hard not to connect this to the broader trend of downsizing government.
Veterans groups are understandably concerned these cuts could have a devastating impact on the services veterans rely on, especially healthcare. It begs a question, are these cuts truly about efficiency, or are they about shrinking the role of government regardless of the consequences?
And this is happening against the backdrop of a potential government shutdown just a week away.
Yeah.
The timing couldn't be worse.
Talk about adding fuel to the fire. Federal agencies are already scrambling with mandatory shutdown planning, figuring out essential functions, bracing for potential furloughs. But combine that with these proposed cuts, these attacks on unions, it creates a climate of fear and uncertainty.
Uncertainty seems to be the theme of the day, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it extends beyond domestic policy. There are reports that a new travel ban is being drafted, though details are scarce.
Another travel ban. This wouldn't be the first time the Trump administration has implemented such a policy, and we know those were met with widespread criticism and legal battles. What more do we know about this potential ban?
The State Department is staying tight-lipped, saying only that they're reviewing all visa programs, but there are whispers that Afghanistan could be on the list.
If true, that would be a significant development. We're talking about people who risk their lives to help U.S. forces and Afghanistan families seeking refuge from a volatile situation. It raises serious ethical questions about our responsibility to those who aided us during the war.
It also raises concerns about the criteria being used to determine who is deemed a threat and who is welcomed with open arms.
Right.
It speaks to a larger narrative about how we define national security and who we choose to protect.
And speaking of protection, the Education Department just dropped a bombshell. They've canceled $400 million in grants and contracts to Columbia University.
The official reason.
Yeah.
Inaction in the face of persistent harassment of Jewish students, Columbia has been grappling with allegations of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, particularly during protests related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So this is the government taking a stance on campus climate, using funding as leverage, but it sets a potentially dangerous precedent.
Exactly. Where do we draw the line between addressing genuine concerns about discrimination and imposing restrictions on free speech and academic freedom? It's a slippery slope, and this move is sure to ignite debate about the role of government in policing campus environments.
Wow, it's incredible how each headline we unpack leads to even more questions and deeper insights. It really drives home the interconnectedness of everything.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. We start with a seemingly straightforward news item, and suddenly we're exploring issues of global power dynamics, labor rights, immigration policy, even the delicate balance between freedom of expression and the need to protect vulnerable groups.
It's a lot to process for sure, but that's the beauty of this deep dive. We're not just skimming the surface, we're really getting to the heart of what's at stake.
It doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
Let's go back to immigration for a second. The Department of Homeland Security has confirmed that they are detaining migrant families with children as part of this wider crackdown on illegal immigration.
This sounds like a return to a very contentious policy, one that drew a lot of fire in the past. Detaining families, especially those with children, raises some serious humanitarian concerns. What's the rationale behind bringing back this policy?
Well, the DHS argues that they are upholding the rule of law, and they're saying that these individuals have final deportation orders from federal judges.
Okay.
They've even announced the reopening of 2 ICE detention facilities in Texas, specifically to house these families.
So it's a hardline stance on immigration enforcement, but it's bound to spark debate and legal challenges. It's hard to see how detaining families, potentially separating children from their parents, aligns with the values of compassion and human dignity that many Americans hold dear.
That's a tough one. It's a flashpoint issue that really reveals some deep divisions in our society.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront difficult questions about border security, due process, and even the very definition of what it means to be American.
Right.
And as we grapple with these huge issues, we're also seeing the impact of policy shifts playing out in unexpected places, like with this recent back and forth regarding Social Security and numbers for newborns.
Oh, right. The Social Security Administration initially canceled the program that allowed parents to register their newborns for Social Security numbers right there at the hospital.
Yeah.
Then just as quickly, they reversed course after a public outcry what was behind that flip-flop.
It appears to be another instance of DOGE's influence causing confusion and disruption. Acting head of the Social Security Administration, Lee Dudek, apologized for the cancellation, saying it created an unnecessary burden on parents.
Right.
But this came right after Dudek was placed on administrative leave for cooperating with DOGE, then reinstated by Trump as acting commissioner.
It's almost comical if it weren't so serious. It makes you wonder, What's really driving these decisions? Is it about efficiency or is it about consolidating power? And what about the implications for data privacy? DOGE now has access to a treasure trove of personal information within the Social Security Administration.
That's a chilling thought. The potential for data breaches for misuse of this information is a very real concern, and it goes beyond just the Social Security Administration. We've seen DOGE inserting itself into various agencies, often with little transparency or accountability. It begs the question, how much power are we willing to cede to unelected entities, especially when it comes to our most sensitive personal data?
It's a question we all need to be asking. Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground today, from international conflicts and trade wars to government shakeups and policy debates. We've explored the complexities of the news cycle, revealing the interconnectedness of seemingly disparate events.
What strikes me most is this recurring theme of power. Who wields it, how it's used, and who ultimately benefits.
Right.
Whether it's through tariffs, sanctions, budget cuts, or data collection, these decisions have real consequences for real people.
Absolutely. And for you, our listener, I hope this deep dive has armed you with the knowledge and insights to navigate this complex landscape. Remember, informed citizens are empowered citizens. It's about connecting the dots, understanding the nuances, and engaging in thoughtful dialogue about the issues that matter most.
And perhaps even more importantly, it's about cultivating a healthy skepticism, questioning assumptions, and seeking out diverse perspectives. In a world awash in information, critical thinking is our most valuable asset.
Couldn't agree more so. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.